Maybe 10 years from now, I'll look back and thank myself for understanding one thing early. The most expensive thing in the industrial world isn't a high price. It's the explosion you can't hide, buried inside a deal that looked too cheap to refuse. My name is Jackie Jia, the founder of UKO. We export cemented carbide rolls and rings to global metallurgical markets. I used to believe that doing business meant meeting customer needs. If they wanted cheap, I found a way to make it cheaper. If they wanted speed, I pushed harder on delivery. If they wanted comparison, I made my price list the most competitive. I thought that was professionalism. That was service. That was what a supplier was supposed to do. The moment I started seeing things differently came last year. Raw material prices exploded. Many private suppliers couldn't absorb the shock, but they didn't want to lose customers either. So they started cutting corners, watering down the composition, skipping steps in the process, jumping past quality checks. On the surface, it looked like the same roll. The price was even lower. But once it hit the production line, some ran 2,000 tons, some cracked after just a few hundred. You couldn't predict it. The customer couldn't predict it. And when the line stopped, everyone stood there waiting. The losses from that downtime couldn't be covered by whatever they saved on the purchase order. To me, this wasn't just another quality incident. It was a knife slicing open everything. In this industry, I had been pretending not to see. From that point on, I did something that didn't feel monumental at the time. I started taking materials from the market, materials other suppliers were using, and sending them to the labs at state-owned factories for testing. What I found confirmed what I already suspected. Some things are invisible to the naked eye, invisible on a quotation sheet. They only speak the truth once they are on the line, under heat, under pressure, and by the time they speak, it's already too late. After that, I made some changes. I started pushing UK50 as our flagship fully traceable raw materials, consistent composition, batch by batch testing. I started researching my customers before I ever sent them a quote, not to see if they could afford us, to understand what kind of equipment they ran, how much a single line stoppage would cost them, what their end users were actually afraid of. I started talking to customers about roll failures, not to scare them, but to help them do the math. I'd say, you save 20% on a cheap roll, but one blowout, one shutdown, one round of replacements and a compensation, and that 20% isn't even pocket change anymore. I started asking about payment routes and import clearance. I told them UKO's bottom line is compliance, not because I'm noble, because this road needs to last 10 years, 20 years. You can't walk that long in the gray zone without eventually disappearing into it. At the time, I didn't stop to reflect on any of this. But slowly, something shifted. The first thing that changed was how I made judgments. Before, when a customer said, 20% more is hard to sell, I'd feel anxious. I'd wonder if my pricing was wrong. Now, when I hear that, my first instinct isn't to cut the price. It's to help them understand that 20% isn't buying material. It's buying the probability that nothing goes wrong on the line for the next several months. The second shift was in customer relationships. I used to function like a responder. Customer asks for price. I give price. Customer asks about material. I send a spec sheet. Now I proactively arm them. Comparison data, risk briefings, lab reports, talking points for their end users. I'm not just selling rolls. I'm helping a middleman become someone his own customers feel safe, trusting. The third shift was in how I see a closed deal. Before, closing a deal meant winning. Now I know some wins are actually losses. If you squeeze the price down until it hurts quality, service, and your brand, that deal isn't revenue. It's a landmine. The profit you book this year might come back doubled as compensation next year. I've spent a lot of time wondering why this change happened. On the surface, it's because I went through roll failures and lab tests and adulterated materials and a full compensation payout. Reality educated me. But beneath that, something deeper was shifting. I had to redefine what long-term thinking actually means. I used to think long-termism was a virtue. Persistence, patience, never giving up. Now I understand it's not a virtue first. It's a capacity for judgment. You have to be able to judge. Will this cheap deal today become an expensive bill 3 years from now? Will the customer who says he only cares about price have someone further down the chain who one day comes looking for answers? Will the inspection costs, the traceability costs, the compliance costs you skip today turn into the reason you can't sleep some night? This isn't about character. It's about accounting. Deep accounting. The kind that stretches the timeline, unpacks every row in the chain, and puts the number on the quotation sheet and the cost of a stalled production line into the same frame. What I eventually realized is this. What this experience shaped in me wasn't sales technique. It was something much deeper. On the surface, I was upgrading a product from generic materials to UK 50, from verbal promises to lab reports, from a price quote to a risk proposal. Underneath, I was training a capacity. When everyone else is staring at the price, I'm staring at the outcome. When everyone else is rushing to close, I'm thinking about what happens after they sign. When everyone else is competing on who's cheaper, I'm competing on who can give a production line more peace of mind. What this gave me wasn't a methodology. It was a sense of order. In a world flooded with cheap temptations, adulterated materials, cross-border uncertainty, and the ever-present threat of industrial downtime, I'm not really selling rolls. I'm taking something that got scrambled by low-price chaos and putting it back together, safe, stable, traceable, reliably trustworthy over the long haul. By the time you get to the bottom of this, it's no longer about cemented carbide. It's about a choice. A person, a brand, a company in a chaotic market choosing which side to stand on. The cheap is enough side. Or the when things go wrong, we answer for it side. I chose the second, not because it's easier, because it lets me sleep at night. And that's when I understood. The industrial world doesn't reward the cheapest player in the long run. It rewards the one who reduces risk, keeps production stable, and makes customers feel safe enough to entrust you with their next order. Once a person understands this, everything looks different. You stop being trapped by, can I win this deal? You start asking, will this customer still be here in 3 years? Will this brand still stand in 5? Will this market still exist in 10? That's what this whole journey has taught me. Not how to sell rolls, but how to become the name that customers in the industrial world think of first when uncertainty hits. Others sell rolls. I sell the certainty of fewer shutdowns, fewer blowouts, fewer regrets. That's my edge, standing up from the table where everyone is gambling on cheap and opening a new game called long-term trust.